It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Habiba Jessica Zaman. Hello, Habiba. How are you?
Hi there. I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Let's see here. You've got a book out called About Beautifully Bare, Undeniably You. Sounds interesting. Yes. We'll get to that in a second. I just want to get a little bit of your backstory. Master's degree in professional counseling, specializing in trauma. You're a therapist and owner of North Star of Georgia Counseling. Okay, tell us a little bit about your work. What kind of counseling do you do?
I do all kinds of counseling. My specialty, however, is trauma. So trauma related to anything that's happened to someone that has left an imprint on their lives.
Well, trauma, that's
what I like to focus on.
Yeah, that's a big topic. I mean, that could be anything from a car accident to a shooting to... Right, okay. What do you get most in terms of people who have suffered trauma? What kind of trauma?
A lot of the clients I have, it's related to childhood trauma, whether that's abandonment, whether that's some kind of abuse, sexual trauma, things like that.
Oh, I see. Okay. Is your book related to your work?
It is. This book, Beautifully Bare, Undeniably You, it's a step-by-step guidance. It is a self-help book, but it's not just telling you what needs to be fixed. It kind of shows you how to do it. And it's reclaiming your identity, trying to figure out who you are, why you are the way you are, why you do what you do, why you think the way you do, why you behave the way you do. And then taking a look back and saying, okay, is this working for me or not? And if it's working, great. And if it's not, then how do we go about rewriting that?
Now, I'm not an expert, and I'm going to assume that you are, so I'm going to take a couple of examples here. When somebody has suffered abuse as a child, obviously you can't erase the trauma that they've experienced, but you're trying to, I suppose, reestablish how they think about the trauma and how it affects them in their life so that it's...
Kind of.
Yeah? Okay, so it takes it away from, for lack of a better term, like a giant boulder on their shoulder.
Right. It's to try to understand how this one specific moment in time or multiple smaller traumatic moments in time or just life itself has shaped the person we are today. How we think and why we feel this way, why we connect the way we do to other people, or why we avoid connecting with other people the way we do. And trying to really understand how we became this way. Because everything we've ever experienced has made some impression or another on who we are today, whether good or bad. And so this book helps to really categorize and help understand the different elements of what makes us human, and trying to see how we became to be this way.
I'm curious, how many people do you get for patients that it was their parents that traumatized them in one way or another?
A lot. Yeah. It is definitely a lot. There are early childhood caregivers. There's a blueprint of how we see the world most of the time. So depending on how that experience was, it's most definitely going to be the reason why we are who we are.
Do you think it was deliberate in most cases, or just parents that were ill prepared to be parents?
Right. I don't ever think that it was intentional. Even the blatant abuse oftentimes is because the parent, they thought that that was what was best for the child at that time. And we try very hard not to ever assign blame, and more so to dig around our childhoods to see why it happened the way it did, and not that you are the reason why I am the way I am, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I think, most of our parents they're doing the best that they can based on what they've known, based on what they've experienced, and based on what they've grown up with. Each generation typically tries to undo something from their own upbringing, or we try to recreate the good things that have happened. So I don't think it's ever deliberate.
Well, I hear that all the time from people who say that when they're starting out and they say that, well, when I have my kids, I'm not going to do like this that my parents did to me. And
right.
That seems to repeat itself over and over.
It does. It does. Our patterns of behavior, we typically go towards what's familiar. And if what's familiar was healthy, well, then that's wonderful. And if it's not, it's an unfortunate, behavior pattern that does repeat subconsciously.
What's interesting about it is that grandparents get a second chance.
Yes.
And
yes.
Oftentimes the grandparents get along better with the grandkids than they did with their own kids. It's very funny.
Oh, 100%. I see it within, my sons and my parents. I mean, my father will take me aside and he's like, just try not to. And I look at him sometimes incredulous, like, really? You want to tell me not to do that? Okay. But I do recognize that with grandparents, they're like, they can see it from the outside this time around, right? Because they're not in it all day, every day. They're not sleep deprived for 14 years as I am maybe. And so they're able to come at it from a different lens. They've seen the whole picture through once around, and they can do it differently this time.
Yeah, that's true. It seems like that biology is not in sync with parental maturity on an emotional level.
No, not at all. No.
It's like ideally we should have our children when we're about 50.
Well, then you've had the experience, you've
Right.
had the life, you know what's valued and all of these things, right? Absolutely.
And it's amazing because the further back in history you go, the younger people were when they were having children. Even my grandparents were teenagers when they had my father. Mm-hmm. And these days, if you have children in your teens, people are going, that's young. But back in the 1920s, mm-hmm. even just 100 years ago, it wasn't uncommon at all.
Right.
And I think is it more...
Adulthood was different back then.
Yeah. Well, at 18 and 16, 17, that's it. You pretty much mm-hmm. had your life spelled out for you. You were going to work. And women had very little option. They had to find a man. That's what my grandmother said. Right. I said, well, didn't you ever want to do anything when you grew up? And she said, well, we were told to find a good provider. That's what she was told mm-hmm. by her mother. That was her goal in life. Mm-hmm. Find a good provider, bear children, and take care of your man.
Right.
Yeah? The world has changed.
That was seen as valuable at that time.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
the world has changed a lot in 100 years. Do you think we've caught up emotionally?
Have we caught up emotionally? I don't think so.
As a society? I don't think so either.
I think we're more aware of it, of what needs to be there, but I don't think we have as a society now. Not yet.
Or do you think we're taking on too much? With families?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
We are. I think the more society progresses, the more we want, the more we think we can do, and we strive for it. And oftentimes we're not paying attention to how finite the emotional, mental, and physical energy we have and that we wake up with every morning.
Yeah, that's true. Well, let's talk a little bit about your book. So your book is called About Beautifully Bare, Undeniably You. Give us a bit of a synopsis of the book. What can someone expect if they pick it up?
Sure. Beautifully Bare, Undeniably You. It follows the journey of both myself and my co-author, Shalon Irving, as how we transitioned from each one of these stages into finding out who we are based on what would be the truest version of what is reflective of our values. And when you pick up this book, you can definitely expect to go on a journey yourself. And then also in reading through our examples and our stories, there are personal vignettes in each chapter. There's a feeling of reading someone's diary. It's a very vulnerable, very exposed look into how it feels to be in that moment as the client or as the reader is also going through it. And so they know that they're not alone, and there's been someone else who's felt exactly the same way and has not only gotten through it, but has thrived.
Are these from former patients of yours?
No, they are. So the techniques are mine. They are techniques that I've used, that I've learned in my educational studies. They are also some techniques that I've created myself that has worked with my clients. And the examples given or the stories given are ours. They're not the clients.
Oh,
I think I may have one that I did use from a client of mine, and I have, her first name on there. She gave me permission to use hers because it was just a beautiful one that she had written as part of the activity that we had done together in our session. But all of the other ones belong to us.
Okay. It says here that Undeniably You, Beautifully Bare, Undeniably You is interwoven with powerful song lyrics. So
yes.
Where did the song lyrics come from? Did you write those?
I did not write them. They are some songs that I connect with or that Shalon has connected with over my lifespan. I've always been deeply intuitively connected to music. It's a way that I've been able to process my emotions and thoughts at times where I didn't have the words for it myself. And so I start each one of these chapters the same way because I was able to find meaning and connection with something that someone else had written. I provide that as well.
Okay. Are these, what kind of songs? I'm trying to get a picture of what they're like. Are they pop songs?
Some are pop songs, some are folk songs, some are... Let me see, I'm going to go through my book as we're talking.
Okay, no, that's great.
The first one, I believe, is actually a poem by Jill Scott. Yes, that's not a song at all. And then we have rock and roll type music. We have, pop. We have some of the darker ones. We have some love-filled ones. We really just went with anything that felt right at that time, and that felt like it was, the lyrics were reflective of what that section is going to feel like.
All right. Do you have a short one you want to share with us?
Yes. Let me find this one. This is not a short one, but okay. This one's, it's Crawling by Linkin Park. It's crawling in my skin. These wounds, they will not heal. Fear is how I fall, confusing what is real. There's something inside me that pulls beneath the surface, consuming, confusing. This lack of self-control I fear is never ending. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, go a couple more lines, yeah.
Controlling. I can't seem to find myself again. The walls are closing in. Without a sense of confidence, I'm convinced there is just too much pressure to take. I felt this way before, so insecure. Discomfort endlessly has pulled itself upon me, distracting, reacting. Against my will, I stand beside my own reflection. It's haunting how I can't seem to find myself again. My walls are closing in.
You said Linkin Park. Is that Chester Bennington? Did he write that?
Yes, he did.
All right, yeah. I know his partner, and he told me the whole story about Chester, so that's probably a very good one to use. Chester was certainly somebody who had a lot of issues. Great musician, but unfortunately died very young. And yeah, okay. Well, interesting you pulled up that one because I know something about it. So, yeah. Well, I'm a Linkin Park fan, but I also know the story of Chester, and I know his partner pretty well. And so, yeah, okay. All right, great. Well, anything else you want to throw in before we wrap it up?
I mean, honestly, the point of all of this is just to be very confident and secure in who you are. And oftentimes it's hard to articulate who you are if you don't go through the steps of finding out how you got to be that way, first of all. And then, always learning that it's a journey into becoming who you're wanting to be. We get to write a whole new narrative each day if we choose to.
Oh, well, that's great. Okay, well, thanks so much for coming on. Do you have a website you want to give out?
Sure. My personal website has all of my books on there. I have 8 books. I have my blogs on there. I have, social media contacts, the other things that I've done through the media, and that's habibazaman.com.
Okay, can you spell that?
Yes. It's HABIBA BIBAZAMAN.com.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing, and best of luck with the book. I hope it does well. It's out and available now?
It is. It is.
Okay, super.
It's out everywhere.
Well, thank you again.
And thank you again for having me.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Douglas Coleman's Don't Do a Podcast is a dryly humorous rant about Douglas's pet peeve, the unrelenting torrent of podcasts hitting the web on a constant basis. As technology has put podcasting within the reach of anyone, many wholly unqualified people have taken the plunge. This witty polemic tries to persuade them from broadcasting their drivel using Douglas's brand of sarcastic humor. Now on Amazon, only 99 cents.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions. You're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Doug Lawrence. Hey, Doug, how are you?
Doing great, thank you.
Oh, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
So let's see, I got to ask right off the bat. You were in the RCMP for 25 years?
That's correct.
Wow. Did you get to wear one of those really cool red uniforms with the big hat?
Yeah, I did, yeah. And the funny boots with the spurs and all that stuff.
Oh, they're great uniforms. I think they're the best ones. I really love them. I think they're very smart. Did you ride a horse?
No. I call it a blessing that when I went into training in 1974, the horses had been were taken out of the actual training regime, and if you wanted to be part of the musical ride, you had to actually take a course on how to ride the RCMP way, and you actually went to Ottawa, Ontario to take the training.
Oh, I see. So they do still have a mounted division, right?
Yeah, I forget how many people there is, but yes, we still have a mounted division, but primarily it's used for show.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's the symbol of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and so they take the musical ride, as it's called. They take it all over the world, and they put on performances all over the world.
So back in the day, though, that was it, right? I mean, the Mounties were horse police.
Yes. Yeah, if you go right back to our very early inception, horses were a large part of who we were and who we came to be.
So this was before the advent of the automobile, I assume?
Yes, quite a bit before. Yeah, and then we kind of evolved into the whole automobile era, and that's growing as well.
There's the educational portion of this interview for people that don't know.
Okay.
More recently, you are an advocate and leader of support mental health with mentoring, and you're the founder of TalentC. Tell us a little about TalentC. What is that company about?
Well, that TalentC is primarily focused on mentoring, and it's mentoring of individuals, it's mentor training, and it's mentor certification. So it's I like to call it, it's all things mentoring.
Okay, mentoring for what?
So and that's a good question. So it can be mentoring for the ideal state where I want to get this, my legacy is to leave this world with mentoring being recognized in all sorts of capacities, but ideally in the family, in the community, in the workplace, in the school, so where mentoring becomes part of the process that everybody needs to go through in order to help them grow on a personal and professional basis.
Okay, that helped out a little. I'm still kind of not clear on exactly what your company would do. So,
okay. Oh, sorry.
Well, no, I'm just trying to think. Okay, so if I came in there and said, I want to buy what it is that you're selling, what exactly are you going to do?
I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions and determine what is it that you actually need, and am I the right person to be able to provide that for you?
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. Right now I'm working with an engineering company to help them implement an informal mentoring process within the organization, and to provide training for both the mentors and the mentees, and then to stay on as an advisor as their program starts to evolve and continues to grow. I will be that advisor that they can come to and say, we've done this, and this, and it didn't work the way we thought it would. What do we need to do differently?
Okay, so companies would come to you typically. Are they typically your clients?
Since I've wandered into the mental health space, my client base has shifted a little bit away from the organization to more so the person themselves. And in some respects, when I look at mental health, it's the organization saying we need help. We have employees that are suffering from mental health challenges, and we don't know how to deal with this. Can you help us?
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Well, that makes more sense. Because that's, when you say mentoring, I mean, just generally, that's very vague. But if you say mentoring with regards to mental health, it's more clear exactly what you do. Because I think mentoring could be for anything, right?
Well, yeah, because like right now I'm doing work in a private school where I'm doing leadership mentoring with the leadership team of the school, and so I go through that process. I also have a service that I call termination versus mentoring, which is if you're going to terminate an employee, let me spend 5 hours with them, and I will change their behavior and get them back on track to be that productive employee that you've come to know.
So specifically with mental health has, I think, come a long way in the last 100 years, although I think we still have work to be done. But when you look at what was going on back in the 1920s and 30s with psychiatric institutions and lobotomies and electroshock therapy and all of this sort of gruesome stuff that they used to do for people who were deemed to have mental health issues. We're no longer doing things like that, thank God. But now we seem to work more in the area of prescribing medication for people. Now, is that necessarily a good thing, to get people on medication for mental health?
It's not from my perspective, and certainly from what I've seen, it's not the desired state. I'm working with a young lady right now that we're doing our darndest to keep her from having to take medication. So, I'm listening and hearing what her story is. I'm non-judgmental, and I'm just asking questions when it's appropriate. And so far we've been able to dodge having to have her take prescribed medication.
What is the most common mental health issue that you encounter?
Right now, with the whole thing that we're dealing with COVID and everything else, the biggest thing is stress, anxiety, and depression.
Now, let's talk a little bit about depression, because I think most people get depressed from time to time and wouldn't be considered to have a mental health issue. The difference being, and correct me if I'm wrong, but people that have genuine depression or diagnosed as depression are ones that simply can't get out of it. Is that correct?
Yeah, you get pulled down into that sort of that funnel, and you can't get out.
Okay, no matter what you do, it just, you simply cannot pick up and get going and get back to your life, that the depression becomes so overwhelming that you can't function, you know?
And I think that that's where the aspect, the idea of mentoring and having we'll call it a mental health mentor, but having that person where if I'm depressed, a lot of times to alleviate that depression, I need to have a conversation with somebody. I need to, sort of have somebody that would be comfortable and willing to just listen and hear what I'm feeling, what I'm going through, and all of that, versus, I'm depressed and so I'm going to go get some medication or I'm going to do something like that. A lot of times there are things that, utilizing mentoring as the process that I'm going to be able to work with a person to help them work their way through that depression.
Did you have personal issues with mental health?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us a little about it?
Yes, I can. And actually, it was as a result of my service in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police that I ended up with post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't like to use the word disorder, so with post-traumatic stress. And I didn't actually realize that I had PTS until I started to do my research and stuff for the book that I've written. It was then at that time that I had one of those light bulb moments where the light came on and I went, oh my goodness, and I've subjected my family to this abuse of, how I described myself back then was I was a first-class jerk. I turned to alcohol as a way to mask how I was feeling and how I was dealing with things. I was verbally abusive to my family, and, God bless my wife. She saw through all that, and, she stood by my side and tried to get me back on track again and took me, my wife and my two children were my support structure that I didn't get from the organization.
What kind of treatment, mentoring, whatever, counseling did you go through?
It was mostly my wife and my two children that, my wife said, you've got to get a handle on this. You've got to go through some of this stuff. And actually what actually helped the most was I left the force and got out of that environment. Because what was happening was every time I got transferred or moved to a new location, that would trigger memories of things that I had encountered in other places. So it just kept bringing it back. And my wife said, if you don't do something, well, I found this out later, but her and the kids were on the verge of leaving me if I didn't take the steps to turn my life around and deal with the post-traumatic stress.
Do you think PTS is very common amongst law enforcement officials?
Yeah, it is. I actually, I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't get a message from somebody saying, a good example was I wrote an article and it got published here just this last week, I think it was, and somebody sent me a note on, I think it was on LinkedIn, that said, thank you for sharing your personal experiences. I saw myself in that whole story that you told, that I too have been dealing with post-traumatic stress, and I have a colleague who is or was a serving member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and that individual is experiencing post-traumatic stress. And so they were very appreciative of the fact that I didn't keep it bottled up inside, that I was willing to share that story.
Okay, so the book that you've written is called You Are Not Alone. Is that what's in the book? Is that what somebody can expect if they pick it up? Is this your personal story?
There's parts of that. I interviewed 5 or 6 individuals who share their story as well. What I try to do in the book, or what I do in the book, is I weave the whole concept of mentoring throughout the book. We weave the concept of mentoring and how it needs to be part of the support structure for mental health and mental well-being.
When was the book published?
It's actually going to be published on the 17th of January.
Oh, all right. Okay, so it's in... is it in pre-order at this point?
Yes, it is. Yes.
All right, great. I was going to ask you how the book is doing, but I guess we won't know for a little while yet. But,
not quite. No,
yeah.
we're getting excited though, because we're on the eve of the launch, so that's a good thing.
How long did it take you to write the book?
It was about 6 months, and I learned some valuable lessons from that experience. That the next one that I write, I'm going to sequester myself away to write the next one.
I was going to ask you that. I was going to ask if there was any sort of cathartic experience once you wrote the book. As you know, you're kind of going through it, and you had some aha moments during that time, yeah?
Yeah, I did, and like I said, the one that really kind of hit me upside the head was when I went, I need to go away and just write until it's done.
Why, were you distracted this time?
Well, I was still trying to, be of service to the people I'm mentoring. I was, dealing with sort of the day-to-day stuff. I lost my wife to cancer in February, so I was,
sorry.
Dealing with all of that, the estate and all the stuff we had to do a celebration. We wanted to do a celebration of life, and we were restricted for a period of time there before we could actually do that. So I had a lot of irons in the fire that kind of took away from me being able to sit down and actually write. And so I'm going to alleviate that issue for the next one, and I'm just going to sequester myself away from everybody for 3-4 weeks and see how it goes.
Are you going to rent a cabin in the mountains? No internet, no electric?
That's exactly what I'm going to do.
Oh, perfect. Well, I tell you, there's a lot of writers have done that they need to get away from everything. And particularly today with everything being online, I think the first thing that needs to go is the internet, just for people to clear their heads, because there's just too much information bombarding us all the time. And I think people are getting a little bit crazy. It's hard to focus your thoughts when you've got so much stuff coming at you.
Well, and the one thing too that I'm doing differently is I keep a pad and a notebook, or a pad and a pen, close by, because every so often I get these ideas or somebody will say something, this should be part of your next book, or you should write a book about this. And so I'm now starting to write all this stuff down, because 2 days from now I probably won't remember what the conversation was. So this way here I'm able to capture that.
Oh, that's great. That's smart. Yeah, because I know a lot of writers, and I'm a songwriter myself, and ideas come through so quick, I forget half of them, just because that's the way the brain seems to work. So, writing everything down or recording it or something so that you don't forget it. Yeah, good idea. Yeah. All right, Doug. Well, thanks so much for coming on. We got to wrap this up. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Yeah, your listeners can go to www.TalentC, and that's the word talent with the letter C on the end, .ca.
.ca. Okay. All right, great. Well, best of luck, and I hope the book does well once it comes out. And thank you for coming on the show. It was nice meeting you.
Yeah, it was great to meet you as well, and thank you so much for this opportunity.